Well, happy Sabbath. Yeah, today I thought what I would do is share a study that I've been doing. Uh, as most of you know, I do study like end time events. I'm very intensely curious as to what's going to be happening these last days. And I've been doing sermons over uh, end time events. I've done it over um, the pagan side of it, the atheist, the that whole subsect of religion. And as you study there. If you look at, I have a chart I'm gonna show at the end of the sermon, but there, if you look at the most populated uh, religions in the world, uh, the number one religion in the world, the biggest religion in the world is Christianity. It's by far the biggest in the world. And you would think that the second biggest would be like the atheist, the paganistic group, but it actually isn't. And there's another religion that's actually number two in the world that we're going to talk about today. And many of you already know what that is. And then after that, it comes the atheist, the paganistic religions, and then Hinduism and Buddhism and all those other religions. And one reason why I'm not real strong on this religion is because I guess I've always kind of ignored it because it's in another part of the world. To me, there's a different people, and it's kind of confusing if you don't really study it. And so bear with me today. I'm probably going to be doing a little bit more reading than I normally do, but it's because I'm just not real strong in it. But I have watched some documentaries over this religion and these people, and but the sermon is actually not about that religion. You can't ignore it. But this sermon is about God answering prayers. And so every week I get up here, we do our prayer and praise, and I read those verses about asking God to heal you. He will answer your prayers if you believe in Him. And sometimes things don't happen as quickly as we like them to. They don't happen in the manner or the way we would like them to. Sometimes we don't even understand that He is answering our prayers. But you can be confident and grounded that He is answering your prayers. Sometimes He answers it in big ways. And you just got to trust Him. And today we're going to be going over Abraham's firstborn, who was Ishmael, not Isaac. And he answered Hagar's and Ishmael's prayer, and he answered it in a very big way. If you pray to the Lord, He will answer your prayers. Sometimes it's direct, sometimes it's in a big way, but sometimes it's indirect, and you don't really know what it is He's doing. Well, where we're going to go is go back into Genesis, and we're going to go back to Abraham. And we're going to read a lot of this story, not all of it, but parts of it that deals with Ishmael, his firstborn son. Because if you understand the story, God had made a promise to Abraham, remember? And he was going to have a child. But Abraham at that time was 86 years old, I believe. His wife was similarly aged. I don't know how old she was. And to have a child at that age was pretty unbelievable. It would take a miracle from God. And so He promised them, you're going to have a child, and I am going to make of him a great nation. Well, as we humans do, we get impatient. We tend to want to try to help God because we don't see Him being able to do it, because we don't see what He's doing, right? And so Abraham and Sarah, I guess her first name was Sarai. Is that how you would pronounce her name? Sarai. And they came up with this plan. We're going to help God by giving Hagar to Abraham because I guess she was barren, or she felt she was barren. And so in those days, in order to produce an heir, it was very common to give the servant to the husband to keep the lineage of that name going. And so that's what they do. And But what happens, which was common in a polygamy family, was that when Hagar saw that she was with child, she started to look upon Sarah with disdain because she had done for Abraham what Sarah, I'll just say Sarah, what Sarah could not. And this caused problems. And so we're going to go ahead and read a few verses. Charles, will you go ahead and put up that first map, just because sometimes seeing where this is happening helps to make it more clear in your mind. Yeah. So before I get started, let me go ahead and just give you an idea of what's happening in this map. Sorry, Charles. I know I'm killing this audio. This is Egypt, and this is Africa right here. You have the Middle East with Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Palestine, the Middle East basically. You have Turkey here, and then you have Greece. This is the beginning of Western Europe, and this is where this whole study is going to be at. It's happening basically here in the Middle East, but as you will see, it actually has importance that's happening in the actual going up towards Western Europe. But let's go ahead and turn in our Bibles to Genesis 16, verses 9 through 12. I'll give you a second just to find it. But understanding this story and how God is answering this prayer actually shows you the origins and the beginnings of what's happening today. All right, and let me go ahead and read it. This is Genesis 16, 9 through 12. The angel of the Lord said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit yourself under her hand." What had happened was Hagar left. She ran away. And the angel of the Lord came to her and told her to return. But he didn't just tell her to return. He actually sent her back, but with a promise to comfort her, to encourage her to go back and fulfill her duties to her mistress. And the angel of the Lord said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit yourself under her hand." Then the angel of the Lord said to her, "I will multiply your descendants exceedingly, so that they shall not be counted for multitude." And the angel of the Lord said to her, "Behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your affliction. He shall be a wild man. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren." All right. This phrase here about him being a wild man and being, I think another version says he'll be a donkey of a man or something. I think that's the King James version. It's believed that what they really are saying here, that wasn't actually a negative, that was a positive. Remember, she is a servant. She's from Egypt. She is a servant to Sarah. And they viewed wild donkeys as being free. And she was saying that he would be free out on the desert. And if you know anything about the children of Ishmael, they were Arabian people. They were people of the desert. They were merchants. They went across the desert in caravans. Those people. So that depiction of what the angel's saying here is that's the kind of life that his descendants would have. And so let's go ahead and read in Genesis 17, 19 through 22. All right, so Hagar returns back to Abraham, and God comes back to Abraham. As you know, this is during the time when Lot is gone to Sodom. This is that whole time period. This was happening here. And then it says, "Then God said, 'No, Sarah, your wife shall bear a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. He shall beget 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this set time next year.' Then he finished talking with him, and God went up from Abraham. So this is the second time, except this that he's making this promise to Abraham about Isaac. But he also reassures Abraham about Ishmael because he loved Ishmael. Abraham loved his son, but it was still a source of dissension between the family. And so let's go ahead and turn to Genesis 21, 8 through 19. And this is where our verse came from today. This is the third time that this proclamation is made to Ishmael that he would be made into a great nation. This is Isaac is born, and as you can imagine, he's older now. Do anybody know how old he was? 14. Yeah, he was a young man basically. In those times, 14 would be pretty much a young man. And so it says in Genesis 21, 8 through 19, it says, "So the child grew and was weaned. And Abraham made a great feast on the same day that Isaac was weaned. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, scoffing. Therefore she said to Abraham, Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, namely with Isaac. And the matter was very displeasing in Abraham's sight because of his son. But God said to Abraham, Do not let it be displeasing in your sight because of the lad, or because of your bondwoman. Whatever Sarah has said to you, listen to her voice, for in Isaac shall your seed shall be called. Yet I will also make a nation of the son of the bondwoman, because he is your seed. So Abraham rose early in the morning, and took bread and a skin of water, and put it on her shoulder, and gave it to the boy Hagar, and sent her away. Then she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. And the water in the skin was used up, and she placed the boy under one of the shrubs. Then she went and sat down across from him at the distance of about a bow shot. And that's a very interesting term. I'm going to come back to that. For she said to herself, Let me not see the death of the boy. So she sat opposite of him and lifted her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the lad. Then the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said to her, What ails you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him with your hand, for I will make him a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the skin with water and gave the lad drink. Okay, so let's go ahead and put that map back up. Let's go to that next one. This is the map I'm going to leave up here. So basically what's happening is now Ishmael and Hagar leave the camp for good. And apparently they still stay in contact with Abraham because Isaac and Ishmael bury Abraham when he dies. So let's go to Genesis 25, 7 through 11. And I'll just go ahead and read it. This is the sum of the years of Abraham's life, which he lived, 175 years. Then Abraham breathed his last and died in good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of what's the name? What's that word? I am horrible with names, sorry. Which is before Mamre, and in the field of Ephron the son of Zohar the Hittite, the field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Heth. There Abraham was buried, Sarah his wife, and it came to pass, after the death of Abraham, that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac dwelt in Beer-lahai-roi. Lahai-roi, what is it? Right. All right. And I'm going to read 12 through 18, just to continue on. Now, this is the genealogy of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's maidservant, bore to Abraham. And these were the names of the sons of Ishmael by their names according to the generations. The firstborn Ishmael, Nebajoth, then Kedar, Abdbel, Mibsam, Mishma, Domad, Massa, Hadar, Timar, Jetar, Nashish, and Kedemar. These were the sons of Ishmael, and they were their names by their towns and their settlements, 12 princes according to their nations. These were the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years, and he breathed his last and died, and was gathered to his people. They dwelt in Havilah as far as Shur, which is east of Egypt, as you go toward Assyria. He died in the presence of all his brethren. So, Ishmael traveled east. And basically, the people of the East, um, a lot of them are from the descendants of Ishmael. And so this is where I'm going to get some help here, because from these people of Arabia, the Arabia Peninsula, the people we call Muslims, and the religion of Islam was born out of, and there's many places in the Bible where we can kind of deduce that their story continues in the Bible, even though it doesn't necessarily say the children of Ishmael. So one was, remember when Joseph was sold into Egypt? Remember, it was the children of Ishmael, the people from the East, that came and bought him and took him to Egypt. And so God used the descendants of Ishmael to preserve his people. So that was one instance of the descendants of Ishmael coming back into the Bible. Another was, let me see here. There's a few. Jethro. If you remember when Moses fled Egypt, he went east. That's correct, right? He went east. And Jethro was a Midianite. Midianite, an Arab, one of the eastern children of Abraham. And so, I'm not going to go into detail because I'm running out of time, but basically, it is believed that he was one of the children or the descendants of Ishmael. Whether that's true or not, I cannot prove it because there's this such a big story that I can't prove it. So you don't think it was?
He was one of Ketua's. Abraham had a concubine after Sarah died, and she had children. And he was a Midianite, and Midian was one of those children. He was Abraham's descendant, but he wasn't a descendant of Ishmael. He was one of the descendants of his concubine's
Okay.
sons.
This is why I'm bringing in you guys to help me here, because this is why this story gets complicated, because the Bible doesn't directly address the children of Ishmael because it addresses the children of Israel. I mean, the descendants of Isaac. And so if you read Job, here's another place where people argue that Job was he was from the East. So whether or not he was a descendant of Ishmael, we don't know, because I don't think there was enough information there. But they said he was a man from the East. Another thing, they said the wise men, when Jesus was born, came from the East, from Persia, which I think is Persia, Iran. So they may have been from the descendants of Ishmael. And those are just some instances where they talk about the people from the East. But the most concrete one was obviously the one with Joseph, because it actually says the Ishmaelites came and bought him. And so because of time, I'm just going to go right into Muhammad. This is why Islam is kind of confusing to me. And so when I was doing this study, I was very curious about how it started more than I was anything else. And it all started with the Prophet Muhammad. And so as you can see down here, there is in Saudi Arabia, down close to the bottom, there is a place called Mecca. And there's also a place called Medina. Mecca, at this time, this is after Christ has died. This is where the story, I think it was in around 622 AD. What was happening is, on the plains of the desert of the Arabian Peninsula, there were the Ishmaelites, basically. There are tribes, and there are factions of tribes all over the desert. Because water is so scarce, you had to become like a tribe where your family and your father, and then was the primary, it was your primary source of life. Because if you didn't have that protection, you weren't going to survive. And then obviously the tribe after that was your second priority, because other tribes had other places, oases of water where they would protect. And these tribes would clash with one another. So this is happening all over the Arabian Peninsula. Well, these tribes had gods and goddesses, just like they had pagan gods and goddesses, just like other countries around them. But there was one place that they would all congregate, and that was in Mecca, where they would you had to put down your arms, and a lot of trade and stuff happened in Mecca. And the reason why is because they believed that that was a holy place that Abraham kept holy. That it's a place that he worshipped. There was a place called the Cabal, I believe, where they believed that a stone from heaven fell and it was a holy stone, and so they would come there to worship. But this is where they would have all their gods and their goddesses, and this is where they would congregate. Well, Muhammad belonged to a tribe in Mecca, and basically by the time he was 6 years old, his parents had died, and the community just kind of adopts you and takes care of you, as it was their yeah, there you go. Charles circled it, and his uncle took him in, which I think he was the leader of one of the tribes in Mecca, and so that was where his protection came from. Well, as I said, these people were merchants, and Muhammad actually grew up, and he was a very charismatic man. This is what they say of him, and that he was very good at being as a merchant. He was very good at trade, but he was also a fair-minded man, and so he was also an arbitrator. And so what happened is one time, I think the stone fell from the Cabal or something, and all the tribal leaders were arguing with one another about who was going to have the honor of putting it back. And Muhammad, before they were about to start fighting, came and basically suggested that they all do it together. And then they started calling, I forgot, Allah something. They started calling him a certain name. No, not Allah. It was a different term. Anyways, he became renowned for his arbitrary skills, and so, but he became very interested in the sages of the time, Christian sages, Jewish sages, all of the sages. So he's very interested in this type of stuff. And then he would go into the mountains to meditate. And it's said that one of these times that he went into the mountains, an angel appears to him and tells him to write down what was said to him and to orate, to tell everybody what the story is. And so he does this, and it's very bureaucratic. Like, it's about everybody's equal. Like, no, man and woman are equal. Children and women are equal to men. And to people who to these people, that is a radical change in philosophy, because remember, you have to submit to a tribe because that's where your protection comes from, and these tribes are warring one another. But if they submitted to what he was saying, that would unify them, make them one people. And obviously, most of the people liked that. Now, the tribal leaders didn't like that because they liked having their power and all that. And so basically, the Muslim people started to grow in Mecca, and those tribal leaders started to plan to assassinate him, to get rid of him, because what he was saying was causing trade to slow down, because people started fearing for their life because they felt like this big change was coming, and that the system that was about to go away. And basically, after a period of time, his uncle died, and the woman who he married was a merchant. She owned a caravan and was a merchant. She died, and so he was left basically to himself. And Medina had problems happening in it, and so they realized, hey, let's invite Muhammad up here to arbitrate and to try to bring some peace to the area. So he and the Muslims migrate to Medina, which marked the first year of the Muslim calendar, which was in 620, around, I think it was 622. So they don't know specifically when Muhammad was born, and as Brother Bernard was saying, some people even suspect if he was ever even a real person. That was the first year that they went to Medina, and they grew in Medina. Well, the people in the tribal leaders in Mecca then started making plans to destroy the Muslims. They want to get rid of them, and so they amassed this army around 1,000 strong, and they marched towards Medina. Well, the Muslims gathered arms and they went out to fight them, and I think they said that they were around 313 strong. And so for 3 years they held out against this larger army. And but as those 3 years went on, other tribes started seeing how God favored the Muslims, and they started to join them, and they ended up being 10,000 strong, and they defeated those tribes all the way back to Mecca, and they besieged Mecca for about a month, and then they took the city. Well, all the people of the city, knowing what happens when you're conquered, the city gets pillaged, everybody gets killed basically, women are sold into slavery, that sort of thing. He comes there, they're expecting all this to happen, and he basically says, "Don't worry about it." That's just me saying it, but he was basically show pity and mercy on those people because Muslims or Islam is a religion of peace, and so he went to the Cabal and they destroyed all the gods and goddesses because Allah, the one God, which is what Islam is about, is that there's only one God, and so 10 years later, Muhammad dies, and so that's the story of Muhammad and how Islam began. Now, what's interesting about this story is, if you read and you hear the story, there's a lot of similarities to Moses, Elijah, and Jesus. Even, I was talking to Brother Bernard, even the way he received the Quran is very similar to other ways that other false religions have received theirs. Like, for instance, I've been talking about the pagan, the occult, that sort of thing. The Book of the Law, have you ever heard of that Aleister Crowley received? He received it in Egypt from a spirit that told him to record this Book of the Law, which is what the occult practitioners use and go by. The Mormons also received the Book of Mormon from an angel, which they believe is Gabriel. They believe that Muhammad received the Quran from Gabriel. So it's very similar to the way those religions received their book. And it's one thing I've noticed, and this is my mom always say, everything that God has, Satan has a counterfeit. And it appears that this is the same way. Now, remember, Islam is supposed to be a religion of peace, right? Well, obviously that's kind of contradicted because right after Muhammad dies, they start to proceed to conquer most of the known world. Then they didn't go into Western Europe, but like all the way from Morocco to the Indian borders of Indonesia, they conquered all that space in almost 50 years, I believe. It didn't take long, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that when they would conquer people, they wouldn't say, "All right, now you got to stop doing your religion and becoming a Muslim." They would say, "You go ahead and continue to do your religion and be governed by it, but you have to allow Islam to do what it is going to do." And that's a very oversimplification of what was going on. But basically, those people really accepted that because this was during the Dark Ages. This was a time when the Catholic Church was persecuting and making it very difficult on people. Taxation, the whole, the history of the Dark Ages with the Catholic Church and Christianity, and they live by the sword as well. So to these people, what's the difference between the Christian sword and the Islamic sword? There's no difference to them. And so this was a very allowing. I think when they got to Jerusalem, they built, what was it? What's the name of that building they built? It's a mosque, but it's the Tower on the Rock, and so the Dome on the Rock, I think. And then there was another building. I don't know if it was in Jerusalem. This is why I'm so shaky, because there's a 3-hour documentary and it's very, very detailed. Like there's a big Christian church, and basically they didn't stop the Christians from being able to worship on Sundays. They just said they're going to worship in it on Fridays. So you see how this religion is kind of compromises and allows the religion that is already in place to be there. And so that's very welcoming to someone who feels like they're conquered, because then you don't really feel the whole weight of that, that suppression. And so throughout the years, what's interesting about Islam, while the rest of the world was going through the Dark Ages, Islam was going through its golden age. It's where a lot of what we experience today, the luxuries we have today, came from. The way we do medicine, they were the first to start doing hospitals and separating patients with this kind of disorder, with that disorder, and separating them apart from one another. Technology, irrigation systems, because remember, this is still a very dry climate, and they started doing irrigation systems, get running water into some of these cities. It's very interesting. They were building mosques everywhere. It was Baghdad. If you know anything about Baghdad, it was a place of learning. It was where they brought all the philosophy from the Greeks and from the Romans and from the Persians, and they would bring all these scholars together, and they would come up with all this stuff. And it was a golden age during those times. And then later on, after you have, when I was doing the pagans sermon, remember the Holy War? It was Muslims, Saladin, I believe his name was, that fought and basically broke the Knights of Templar, their whole dominance of the area in Jerusalem. This is where all this is starting to come into conflict. This is the first time you see the pagan, the Masonic forces versus the Islamic forces fighting is in the Holy War with the Knights of Templar. And they won that, and basically what happened was, what brought down the golden age of the Islamic world was when the Mongols invaded, and they went down, they destroyed some cities. But a funny thing is, they got converted by Islamic, and then they proliferated it even farther out in the Islamic world. And then later on, then you have the Ottomans and the Turks. And you had the greatest king in that time, which name was Suleiman, and he was a sultan. And what was happening was they wanted to continue to expand, and this is a warring people, but they wouldn't go east, and they wouldn't go. I forgot what the other direction was, because Muslims control the area, so they knew they had to go to the Christian lands, which was the Western Europe. And there was another direction I forgot they were trying to go into that wasn't controlled by Muslims. And so, but the problems were not the conquered people or the Christians. It was the people, their own people, the Sunnis and the Shiites. You've heard these terms, these names today. The Sunnis are the largest faction of Islam, and the Shiites are the second largest faction of Islam. And there's other factions, obviously. They're just like Christianity. You have Protestant, you have Catholic, and in the Protestant you have, a basket full of different divisions. And so they were arguing amongst each other, and what the Sultan did, the Ottomans, I'm not going to go into their whole history, they would take children from the Christians, and they would bring them in, and then they would teach them, educate them, train them to be 100% loyal to the Sultan. And that's how they would build their armies, because they didn't have any allegiance to these other factions. And so they tried to break into Western Europe and failed. I don't have time to go into how that all went down. And then obviously in the Ottoman Empire failed during World War II. World War I. They were disbanded, basically. You got the country of Turkey, the Ottoman Empire. That's how far that empire lasted. It was into like the World War I. And so, go to that last slide. I'm basically giving you a highlight. I mean, this is a very deep subject. Now you get back down to our times, and like I said, Christianity is these are the latest numbers, 2.2 billion. Islam is 1.6 billion people. The atheist, secular, agnostic, that's 1.1 billion people. Hinduism is 1 billion. Chinese traditional religion is 394 million. Buddhism is 376 million. Then it just keeps going down, down, down. And believe it or not, this comes back to that whole theory of a people trying to conquer the world. And Islam, the reason why there's, like, you have the ISIS or ISIL, however you want to pick it. I would read and tell you a little bit more about it, but they claim Islam. But a lot of your Muslims are going to say this is not Islam. So there's this big, division about how you should be trying, about how to live your life. It has to do with the jihad, or was it jihad? There you go. And the way it teaches that you should kill a Jew. That's the highest form of spirituality or of Islamic religion. It's a big player. Now, the whole point of this was, even though we know that Islam is not the true religion. We know that these people are major players in the world today. God kept his promise, though. Did he not? He kept it in a big way. He made of him a great nation. They are the second largest people in the world. Now, not all Arabs are Muslims, and not all Muslims are Arabs. Understand that. But it was born out of those people. That's who introduced it to the world, and that's where it came from. And so you have just a quick little note, and I'm gonna end it. I was reading a book. It was about this stuff, about the end time events, about the wars going on. They were passing out books about warning people about the Illuminati, the in-world events, the New World Order, that sort of thing. And these Muslims came up, and they saw the book, and they were like, "Oh my God, y'all know about this too?" They know all about what's happening in the world today. They know about this New World Order and all that. And they say that's what they're fighting against. They're trying to stop this New World Order. ISIS takes it too far, but that's generally that's who they're warring against. They see us as the enemy because they see us as being that power. And so that's just a quick little interesting note to tie to the other sermons. But that's one of the reasons why they do this. They do this, all this destruction. But basically, he kept his promise. They became a great nation. Sometimes he doesn't do it in the way you would think he would do it, but he does keep his promises. And it's really interesting. I'm telling you, I just covered the very, very, very top of it. There's so much more that was to the story. There's so much more to the history of these people. I've learned a lot from doing this study. It's very fascinating how it all happened and went down. But once again, it's the true religion from a false religion. They say they're a people of peace, but yet they use a sword to try to conquer the world. That's basically what it comes down to, and we're very successful at it. God is a God of peace. He doesn't try to conquer the world. He's not trying to do it through war, death, and destruction. He does it through love. He does it for forgiveness, and that's what it's all about. And you can believe God when he says he's going to do something, because he doesn't lie. He holds his promises, and that's why we can believe in the prophecies that we have, because he keeps his promises to each and every one to this world. And so hopefully you found that very interesting. Maybe it shed some more light on what's happening, who they are, because I'm telling you, I was completely in the dark about this when I started studying it, and I still got a lot to study about it. They are a world power. They have a lot of what's going on today, and they're everywhere. They're all over the world. And it doesn't mean all Muslims are bad or evil. There's God's people in their people too. All right. It just means that the religion itself is what you have to know what you're dealing with. It's just like Catholicism. It's Christianity, but is it really? You see what I'm saying? So a lot of Muslims, they believe that Islam is a religion of peace, and that's what they believe, and they try to live by that. They worship Allah, who is also, they believe in one God, not a whole lot of gods. They believe there's one God Almighty. So it's an Abrahamic religion, but you just got to understand that it's not like you have people who hijack a religion and use it as an excuse to do evil, like what happened in the Middle Ages. You have a religion of peace, which is Christianity, and it got hijacked, and it was used to terrorize people, basically, and to control them. And so that's it. That's the second world power that we are dealing with today. And yeah, there's a real war going on, and times are going to get worse, just like as Brother Bernard said, before the Lord comes back. But they're just another player in this big cosmic picture that's happening here on this earth. And we should keep them in our prayers, because most of them are good people, just like everyone else. They're good people Most of them are misled. Most of them believe, they just believe they're doing what's right. But if you don't follow Jesus Christ, if you don't believe he was the Son of God, which most Muslims do not, or all Muslims do not, they just believe he was a great prophet. Only through Jesus Christ can we be saved. And so we should keep them in our prayers, and we should try to help them and teach them and to share our beliefs with them as well. So with that, let's lay our heads down and let's say a word of prayer. Lord, there are many things in this world we don't understand. There are many belief systems, many peoples that we don't understand what they believe and why they believe it. But they're your children as well. And we ask that you help us to share with them the truth, and do it in a way that is not a deterrent to make them turn their head from you, but to look at you with open eyes and honest hearts, and to make a decision of who they will serve. And we ask that you give us the words and the Holy Spirit to do and to say in the manner that we need to in order to save these people as well. And Lord, we just need to love them and love our neighbors and love everyone. And Lord, we love you most of all. And Lord, we just say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.